I'd like to call the study session of January 21st of the Board of Directors of Tacoma Public Schools to order. Would you please rise for the flag salute? Catherine, why don't you start it?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The reason we're meeting tonight is to have a study session on a process that started earlier this year because of our new school construction and some other issues about, thank you, Shannon, having to revise boundaries for some of our elementary schools. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Garcia because he's going to introduce who's going to be presenting tonight. Before we do, I want to thank Rosalind and Dick Withcomb and his people, because I went to one of the meetings and just observed, and it was amazingly run smooth and ability to have everybody feel that they were heard. So I think we can be proud of this effort on the part of our staff. With that, Dr. Garcia, if you would please.
Fantastic. Thank you, President Vial, Board of Directors. President Vial did a fantastic job of summarizing why we're here. So we have one agenda item tonight. We will be making no decisions. This is designed to inform you of the superintendent's recommendation. She apologizes that she can't be here, but she has indicated she has full support. In her words, the best, most trouble-free boundary process to date, and I've probably just jinxed it at that point, that she's ever experienced. And so with that, we have a team, Rosalind Medina and Sue Race, who have been two fantastic leaders in this process and have shepherded us and our community through months of work to bring you this recommendation. And then from here, after tonight, we will hopefully be bringing you a decision we would be seeking approval at the next board meeting scheduled for next Thursday, the 28th. So with that, Ms. Medina.
Good evening. I would like to just start off by saying I appreciate all the thank yous and the accolades, but I would accept that on behalf of a much larger team than myself, and that includes most definitely Dan Vopel, Steve Murakami, Sue Edshaw, principal at Washington currently, and then all of the principals and level directors that participated in our process, as well as the cabinet who helped guide us. So I just want to throw that out there to start off with. You have in front of you or on your computers a packet of information regarding the boundary process that was prepared, and that is also listed online as part of the agenda for tonight, so you can follow along. We've provided a glossary of terms so that as you go through this packet, you have a reference point as to what some of the more confusing terminology means or some of the vernacular that the district uses that you can use back for reference. To quickly review the process that we embarked upon, back in April, the board tasked us with coming up with a process around boundaries as far as the Whittier Wainwright School was concerned. And in order to accomplish that task, we felt that we needed to work with someone who had some experience in that area. I personally wasn't experienced in that, and we know that it can be a very politically sensitive and emotionally charged conversation. So we employed Mr. Dick Withcomb, who wasn't able to be here tonight. He sends his regrets, but is very pleased with the way the process has worked out, I'll say for him. That process started in April. The board gave us the direction to go ahead with the process that Mr. Withcomb has employed in other districts, I don't know, maybe 30 other times over the course of his career. And with that, he helped us develop some internal documentation to help us devise an ongoing process that we can use in a repetitive fashion. We have an outline and a process that now we know what to do, and we can move forward without so much hand-holding from Mr. Withcomb. In saying that, he helped develop a committee charge, and that committee charge was approved by the board in July. And it outlined for us that we were going to involve a number of elementary schools and a couple of middle schools in a large format committee that would get together and discuss proposal options for revising boundaries. In that, in order to help further that process along, we created a small district technical team, and that technical team went through a number of different options of revisions that could be done to elementary school boundaries and where we felt we needed to address boundaries more quickly than other areas of town. And hotspots, we identified the hotspots. And with that, we created a boundary springboard proposal that we took to our larger committee. That committee got together starting in September. It was representatives of each school, two community members, I would call them. It could be parents or interested parties, and the principal of each school. And they met every other week for 3 months for 2 hours each time. And it was a grueling process, very informative, but grueling. They were very honest and forthright. They protected their own interests, but knew that they needed to represent the bigger picture of what they were trying to accomplish. And so it really was an interesting and enlightening experience. And I think that the team felt that they were well heard and that they were informed enough to go back and have community conversations. Once we were able to get through a number of process items through that committee, we were able to come up with a preview for the public, which we had on November 18th. And that led to a formal hearing on December 16th. So we did have 2 opportunities for the public to come and ask questions and interact, both with the committee and with district staff. In order to provide us with the most updated information, we also used a GIS consultant, Flow Analytics, and that was Mr. Tyler Vick, who also helped us tremendously. I don't think that we would have been able to have such a smooth boundary process if we hadn't had the clarity and data that we were able to get through this new GIS tool. And it's a GIS tool that we'll be able to use and employ for many things, many aspects across the district, and we're starting to do that with our cabinet now. Beyond that, the committee was finalized on January 6th after the public hearing was completed. They sent their recommendations to the superintendent and cabinet. Carla, Ms. Santorno, was able to approve those on January 12th and present those to you as her recommendations for formal boundaries for the new school, as well as surrounding schools. With your approval, we will have on January 8th, hopefully, January 28th, sorry, we will move forward with communicating out to the constituents what the changes are. And on February 28th, we're anticipating bringing the Boundary Committee in for a formal recognition. Do you want to add anything to that, Sue?
No, I do want to say that the participation was excellent. It's probably the best group of people and process that I've ever seen, and I've been here a while and gone through about 10 of these.
So, and one of those pieces that we would add in this conversation that the team is that they will also be making recommendations if you choose to approve the recommendations on transition planning. And so that was part of their work, making recommendations on transition planning, so that there's a lot more work to be done. And so it's not just communicating out, it's communicating out and planning, so what are next steps? But that is all contingent on your decision to approve or to not.
Okay, we'll make it clear that we're not going to approve this tonight, but we will
Correct.
be taking it up next Thursday night on the 28th.
Correct.
For action. Okay,
That's
just so people, if they think we're going to do it tonight,
Yeah.
we're not. This is just for the floor board members, and unfortunately, Director Hines is out of town for us to ask questions and clarification and for the meeting on the 28th. Okay, thank you.
Just to give you a quick outline of what the exhibits entail that are included here. Exhibit 1 was the original charge, and embedded within that are the results of each of those items that you charged our committee with, so that you can identify the areas where or how we've addressed the areas of concern that were initially charged to the committee. Exhibit 2 is the information of both before and after the revisions for each school that was impacted, and the areas that are impacted are highlighted within each of these, and there is a data sheet that gives out some demographic information on each school before and after. I would say that most of this was prepared by our GIS consultant as part of the boundary committee work. They would sit together. The teams of the boundary committee would say, here's our thoughts on what this could look like. What if we do this, what happens? They would take that over to the GIS consultant. He would move the little boxes around and pop out the information. And then they could say, did that do what we thought it would do? Does that address our concerns? Does that meet the charge that we have? And then they would make a recommendation as a formal group to say, yeah, we like that or we don't like that. And they did that. It was a repetitive process, iterative. They did it, I would say, probably 50 times over the course of their 6 weeks of developing a proposal. So it wasn't just an instantaneous, we'll try this. And it really does look very different than our springboard proposal did initially. They really took the work to heart and evaluated what the impacts would be.
Rosalind, if I could jump in, I read yesterday that there were 2,900 kids that were going to be affected in the area, and only 320, I think it's 6 or 7, will be actually affected by the boundary change. So I think that the committee did an excellent job of minimizing impacts on, my own editorial comments and everybody else can talk, on minimizing impacts on families, and yet at the same time addressing the changes that needed to be made to address the overcrowding and reassignment of kids because of new school construction.
Yes.
So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Exhibits 3 and 4 go together, and they include both the district's recommendations on how to address some of the questions that we had come through, as well as I'm not sure if it printed out well.
It did.
It did. It's very small. I apologize for that. And Exhibit 3 is the committee's recommendation on transition plans. So they sat and talked through an entire meeting to determine, sorry, do you not have it, or?
I just don't know which one it is.
Okay.
Here it is. Here's 3.
That's the recommendations on.
That's on
Transition
transition.
plans?
Okay.
Okay.
And then
Got it.
4 is
Okay.
4 is the answer to the questions that came up, and then 5 is the process for how to go forward with it, which we mentioned.
Thank you.
you.
Sorry.
Sorry, that's okay. We've been trying to multitask here. We have another task we need to do at the moment. I apologize.
So this outlines the various transition plans, both at the middle school level and the elementary school level, devised by some by the district and some by the committee. And this represents many of the concerns and questions that we heard through either the public process or through questions that came in online or through the questions that the committee had as they were going through the process. I'm not sure if you have any questions on that.
Do you want to basically
Just to go through an outline of it.
have the time to have us look at each one of these maps just briefly and explain what they show and what they don't, what
Oh,
their
sure.
cross-hatch areas are? I mean, it's fairly explanatory, but just as look at it, where the shifts are, and so that we can see, if you don't mind.
I can. I don't know street names necessarily, and I'm not sure that I'm going to do this a very, very good justice to this. So you tell me if I'm just mutilating it, and I'll stop.
Okay, because I do know most of them.
Great.
I'm part of
So
Tacoma.
if I look at the Whittier-Wainwright boundary area, when we closed Wainwright, we shifted many of their students over to DeLong. And so what you see at the top or the north end of this, I'm not sure if that's north end, I'm assuming that's the north end of the Whittier-Wainwright area, we are going to bring back a portion that used to be part of the Wainwright boundary area of students that were attending DeLong. And that's 127 students that will be brought into the Whittier-Wainwright enrollment area. And then on the south side, there is a very small chunk from Manitou Park that will also be moved into the Whittier-Wainwright area, 140 students. And it's a very small geographic area, but it incorporates some apartment buildings. And so those apartment buildings have a large number of students attending. Any questions on that one? Okay.
Just mainly so people can understand what we did
Right.
quickly, and if anybody has any questions, just let me know. Okay. Sometimes it's hard when we do it this way.
Right.
Okay,
Back it back up.
thanks.
So looking at the DeLong area, you'll see on DeLong that there are 48 students that are moving to Franklin on the northeast side of the DeLong boundary area. Those students had previously been attending DeLong. And then we have a a box of students off to the east side of the DeLong boundary area that will also be moving to Franklin. That affects 22 students. And we have that same Whittier-Wainwright area that we talked about on the previous map.
Okay, great.
And they're color-coded to the maps that they
Okay, so,
align to.
okay.
Moving on to the Franklin boundary area, the DeLong area on the left-hand side, on the west side that we just talked about, of the Franklin area will move in from DeLong. That's the 48 students. And then we talked about the southern area as well here. South of Franklin, we'll have 22 students moving from DeLong. So this is the same as outlined on the Edison map. DeLong map.
Okay.
Moving over to the Edison boundary area, you'll see that there are 40 students in the Manitou Park area currently that will be moving into Edison, and there are 35 students who are currently attending Edison that will move to Arlington.
So if I could jump in real quickly, the
Yes.
chart on the bottom for those that are following online at home basically indicates the current numbers as well as the proposed numbers. And so you can see that the committee really tried to address multiple needs with this idea that we wouldn't have to redraw boundaries
For a while.
for a while.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
And this was also the sensitivity of that we were focusing in on middle schools with our agreement that we would come back to you folks and design a process to look at middle schools next in there. And then RPC is recommended program capacity, the percentage in there. And so you can see that some schools will go up a little bit and some schools may have gone down, but they're all hopefully in addressing recommended program capacity in an enhancement approach, meaning giving more room to schools to run different programs.
So going over to Manitou Park, the only area that we haven't addressed is to the south end of the Manitou Park area. 50 students will be moving to Arlington. We saw at Arlington that there was considerable low enrollment, and we wanted to address that, especially as we work to develop a new building there and ensure that we don't have to come back when we open Arlington and try to revise boundaries to ensure that we have an appropriate number of students within the catchment area.
So this wouldn't go into effect for a while then?
No,
that part.
this goes into effect for the 16-17 year. However, once the building comes back online, and I'm not sure where their swing site is.
I'm sorry? It's been determined yet, has it?
I'm not sure.
What did you ask? Swing site.
Their swing site.
No, I have to wait and see. Probably, I don't know.
They're exploring several different
They're looking at
options.
different options, I've been told. So.
And Director Winskill, that comes back to your question of when they'll start, will really be into that transition opportunities. And so there's not going to be a one size fits all. There may be this approach where we look and say, yes, we're going to move as much to the 16, 17, but families are still going to have to look at their immediate needs, whether that's childcare opportunities. And we're going to have to be nimble and flexible to try to meet those needs in the beginning. And the superintendent has been very clear about that. And then over the course of time, we'll work on that transition plan. And so those are some of the details that the team will have to work on. But we won't be able to do that until we are very clear about what your approval process is, or final approval. And then from there, we'll build transition plans.
And then moving on to the Arlington page, we've talked about both of the impacts, one from Edison, 35 students from Edison, and 50 students from Manitou Park. And those are the impacts to the individual schools. We reviewed demographics. We tried to be geographically sensitive. We wanted to make sure that we weren't creating isolated pockets, either geographically or demographically, within each school population.
Exhibit 3 really gets into some of those transition recommendations as the starting point. So you can see some of the early work has been discussed and recommended.
I have a clarification question of you, Dr. Garcia. When we are on the 28th, we will not be approving these, we'll just be approving the plans, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, then we will work on the transition or roll those out between now and September or whatever. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's a perfect segue to Exhibit 5.
Oh, gee, I'm glad we set that up so
You
well.
are amazing. a transition to Exhibit 5, where we sort of lay out the next steps in the boundary process that we see need to happen immediately, or at least in the very near future. The study session is tonight. That's the fourth item down. We're hitting a timing issue in that we need to send out letters to our fifth grade families, and so we have crafted a letter that says, pending board approval, your school for fifth grade will be X school, or sixth grade will be X school, and to give them some ability to know that there's a process that's in transition, and so that we can try and work through our process as quickly as possible. Everything rolls off of our ability to identify where sixth grade students will go. And then we will have request our board approval on the January 28th. Pending board approval, of course, we will immediately start sending out with public information communication to all the impacted families. We will send school lists of the students that are impacted, both those coming and those leaving, so that the schools can work with those families to understand the transitioning, to set up open houses, to invite the new students in, and to create a welcoming environment for them. And then we will work to adjust for staffing, because we need to make sure that we're staffing each school appropriately based on their revised enrollments. And then finally, we'll begin our work on the technical team springboard proposal for the middle school process, and bring something to you sometime in early spring for you to have a conversation about the process around middle schools.
Okay. Who wants to start? Debbie? Director Winskew.
So in the past, when we have told people they're going to be in a different school, we kind of grandfather some people in. Are we grandfathering people in?
We do have, the committee made a recommendation to
Director
allow.
Winslow, Could you perhaps repeat your question into the microphone? It did not get picked up for
Yes,
the
I
transmission.
just want to know, my question is about grandfathering students in who have geographically been displaced to another school, to stay at the school they're in.
Yes, so with the committee's work, they talked about this at length, probably a good hour, about what should be included or who should be allowed to grandfather. And what they said was, we will allow our current fourth graders to continue fifth grade at their current school so that they don't have to disrupt their elementary program. We will provide transportation for them. And if they have any siblings that also attend that school, those siblings can continue to attend. For everyone else, we plan to shift them to their new school starting next year, and we will provide transportation provided they're within a transportation area to their new school. They still have the option to optionally enroll. That we believe in that process, and they'll always be able to do that, provided that there's space available at the school that they want to attend. And for those students who are currently attending Whittier Wainwright that optionally enrolled, they will be allowed to continue attending that school because they've optionally enrolled into that program.
Okay, that's all I have
Okay,
at this
great,
moment.
thank you.
I just have a few comments. Years ago, I participated in one of these committees, and it's a tremendous amount of hard work. It's very emotional,
Yes.
whether you mean to or not. I think we had a 50-person committee that met across 8 months on a biweekly basis or some insane thing. And then I don't think that they ever actually used the recommendations at that time that the committee came up with. So first of all, I want to give tremendous gratitude to everybody that participated in this, and I hope that maybe the superintendent of the board can send thank you letters to those people that did this work, because it's
We will.
important and it's technical. I also really appreciate the summaries of each school, the details of the current before and after. That's all I don't have that many questions because they're so well answered from the get-go. So I just have accolades for you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing our transition processes can be approved as well, because again, I see you balancing out some of the overtime enrollment issues that we have so that we can make sure that schools stay sustainable. And it's just fabulous. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Cobb, do you have any questions? Comments?
I'm sort of stewing on a question, but it's more middle school oriented, so
Okay.
I'm looking forward to the middle school conversations that come. In the transition recommendations, there's mention of Whittier and Wainwright and Gray as middle schools that are impacted.
Right.
But that for the Franklin boundary, where some kids, well, I think we're all of those kids who are in the current Franklin boundary, they go to Mason. I think that's correct.
Right.
With these additions, do those kids go to one of the other middle schools?
Right, good question. So middle school your middle school homeschool is defined based on your current address. And unless you opt into another school, you're going to attend based on your address. So unless you move, your middle school would change. Your middle school is not going to change just as part of this process, with one exception in that with the Whittier Wainwright catchment students, they have both a small school option and a homeschool option based on their address.
Okay.
I'd just like to add, so that's all based on the current middle schools.
Correct.
And so when the board last year, they were very clear, correct me if I'm wrong, Board of Directors, that middle schools also had to be looked at. And the process that we established was to look at it in 2 phases. The first was address the elementaries because they were the most immediate and the hot spot. And based on that information, we would have to then look at middle schools. And so, as Chief Operating Officer or Chief Financial Officer Medina mentioned, that yes, that's how it is today. Based on your approval, or if you do approve, that's why it's really critical that we start the middle school process soon after that. And so we would be coming to you with a process first that we would like to work through and a recommendation, and we would seek your approval of that process, very similar to what we did this time. And then that team would hopefully repeat some of the successes that they've had this time. And that's what we would like to see. And with once again going back into working with the community, there are other implications at the secondary level that are different than at the elementary level, and so that would need to be considered. And then from there, we would hopefully, in that process, based on your approval of the process, be bringing you back very specific recommendations for you to consider. So 2 phases. So current status quo, but that all changes based on your recommendations or approval.
Right, and also I think we have talked about setting boundaries for Hunt Middle School when it comes back on, so that people will know where they are come 2020, especially in the West End, and that's a great concern that we do that with the parents up there, that they have some certainty about where their kids are going to go. If the younger ones that are in elementary, well, where will we go? Mason, Truman, and I said, well, they'll redraw the lines, and if we can do that either in this process or soon after, so there's certainty over there that when that school opens in the fall of 2021, then parents will know, and people in the neighborhood will tell me, well, now I don't have to look at going to University Place. And I said, no, you don't, because that is a fact of life where we are. The nearest middle school actually is University Place Junior High. So that's something I would ask that we consider to be in that process, and that can be changed, but so that people get some idea of where those old boundaries are going to be, and that will relieve some of the pressure. I looked at these numbers, and I thought, you really did a great job of balancing, and I look at that as an equity issue, where some kids go to a real small school and some have been basically overcrowded, about balancing out so that we're in that 350 where we think a middle or a elementary school should be pretty much across, rather than Manitou at 600 and Arlington at 2. We're now going to have that split. And I also was very pleased to look at the equity issues vis-a-vis, as you said, race, free lunch, and so on. They changed with maybe 0.5% or 1% up and down, but we're not messing with the demographics of the neighborhoods in which we are assigning kids. So, as Catherine said, our Director Ushka said, Vice President Ushka, I can't remember which your title is right now. Oh, okay, I know that's it. That works. I think I would be happy to sign a letter from the board to all the committee members thanking them for their service, because I know this is not an easy task.
Yes.
Okay, is there other questions?
Yeah,
Director
since we're talking
Winsky.
about middle schools, it would be my expectation, you say you're going into this right away, that wouldn't take effect for another year.
No.
Because when I see Stewart, I mean, it's going to be a real inconvenience for people if they had to change schools and say you have to go to Stewart next year when they're not even at their site. So I would hope that would be the thinking of the administration. That
So one of the things that we brought to you that we plan to do again is we would design the process, and then we would come to you with that recommendation of process. And so any guiding principles that you would have that you would want to include in that process, we would want to know those things, such as Director Winskill, such as Director Vial. Please consider the following. And then once you've really had a chance to give us the riverbanks, if you will, the guardrails, that's when we would go work with the community and with staff and look at the implications and make a recommendation based on those guardrails, if you will. So when we say we're going to launch, these are some dates, those are some recommendations, but we're not going to just launch the day after the 28th on middle schools.
Right.
The first step is to design the process. And so please, what are those guardrails? Share them with board leadership so that we can have those, and then we'll come back in that process and incorporate those so that we address all those concerns.
Yeah, so every time we open a new school, it becomes overcrowded immediately. Everybody wants to go. So my expectation is that once Stewart is done, many people are going to want to go there. I know it's low in population right now, but the move is always difficult for people, and so open it. And they will come. You know,
Well, maybe that'll
Baseball
relieve some of
field.
the pressure on First Creek.
yeah, it should.
So that
yeah,
it
that'd
should,
be great.
really, because when Stewart was doing well, they were pretty evenly divided, and
Yeah,
so that should do that. So that may be a blessing in disguise in that respect.
yeah.
So it would
Hey,
be helpful,
you
I think,
know.
for staff, President Vial, if you could work with board, just
I would be happy
members to
to.
start to think about what those guardrails or considerations that you'd like us to consider in that process.
Okay, we can do
And we
that.
can start to think about those as we even bring a process recommendation to you.
Oops. Are there any other questions, comments of the board? We'll get out of here early if there isn't. Dr.
Thank you.
Garcia? you
I
have
just
any
want to
others?
once again thank the staff and the community members
too.
and your leadership. You know,
thank you for
this is
guiding.
a subtle piece that continues, that folks seem to think that things just go on. You do a lot of pre-thinking, like you already started tonight. That is extremely helpful for us, whether it's strategic planning or these boundary processes, to have that thinking up front. That's a real gift for us to engage folks when people know the thinking. It's when we get into the last minute, and it's great if we learn more through the process and we adjust. But that opportunity for leadership to really get clear about what are the community's needs and to incorporate those are a real gift. So thank you very much once again, Ms. Pace, Ms. Medina, Ms. Race, the entire team. Dr. Hodge is in the back. Mr. Vopel's left. There's been, I would say, hundreds, if not more, of people have touched this in a very positive way. So thank you all.
Thank you. With that, I think we can adjourn and go home early. How's that? Any other business? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Great. This is pretty clear.